my advice would be that we're all driven to perform and to do all as much as we can for society. But I'm going to say to you, stop and smell the roses and take a few naps. When you're tired, it's better that you take a nap. You get along better with your siblings and with your, with your family. Take a nap. My plants, you see that I have a lot of them here, and they're almost like personal friends. I think that's a good outlet for your frustrations. I think there is a work ethic that comes from the Europe. And my dad's ancestry obviously was from Germany. And it just wouldn't occur to him not to do something productive. He wouldn't be able to just sit and do nothing. I've outlived everybody. One of them, I think I would say to people about what they should do is that they should look at life and not take it too seriously. Laugh a lot if you can. And I do believe that it is important for all of you to keep track of what's happening in politics. You date somebody and the next day he's sent off to sea, and two of the men that I was dating at the time were killed. So that was a terrible time. I guess I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Well, my mother was a full-time housekeeper. She was there for us when we were growing up. You know, when we came home from school, we knew she was going to be there. So she was there all the time and supportive of what he was doing. But I think when I look back on that, they didn't have a whole lot of fun. My dad was kind of glued to his drawing board. I don't remember them going out partying or going out dancing or anything like that. I don't remember that. But how she felt about it, when you think about it, maybe she resented it, that they didn't have more free time. I had a bicycle, and I was riding down the street, and I discovered my brother hiding behind one of those walls, smoking a cigarette, and he was in high school. Your relatives wanted to know that, and all he said to me was, "Don't tell Mom and Dad."
And you listened, you didn't tell Mom and Dad?
I didn't tell. I didn't. It maybe was a mistake, but no, I didn't.
If he caught you doing something you weren't supposed to, do you have a memory of that? And if so?
I never did anything wrong. When he was at that Jesuit school, he was really quite a long way from home, so he had to take streetcars and buses and so forth. And people, young men, would tease him about the color of his hair. And it would make him so angry that he'd fight. And so he would come home with, with bruises from the fights that he had had, just protecting his red hair. His hair was red. Mine was more golden in color. Mine was not that red. This is my mother when she was married to my dad, who is here. This was probably taken about the same time. This is her mother. This is my grandmother on the Waterwald side. This is my grandmother on the Geisse side. This was my dad's mother. She lived in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. She had a two-story white clapboard home, and in the back there was a carriage house. And I remember as a kid, my brother and I would go out in that carriage house and climb up the stairs to see what was up in that attic. And somebody had collected a lot of birds' eggs. And maybe that's one of the things that you asked about, did I do anything naughty? But I do remember we broke those eggs.
Naughty, naughty.
It was naughty, naughty. It was naughty, naughty. Oh, I wrote something back here. Can you read that?
Let's see. It says, Milny, Czechoslovakia, or Czechoslovakia. The what is it? Wahau?
Wadawa.
Wadawa family.
But it was spelled with a V over there.
Okay, so the Wadawa family owned this shoe maker shop in Milny. My uncle John Wadawa had this painted in Bohemia in 1917. He was there as a diplomat after World War I.
Okay, that's what you want to know.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's just hold it up for 1 second like this. Like that. And keep hold it back as far as you can. And we'll get the shot of it.
I think the Crosswind landing gear. In fact, he went before Congress and testified about that. Because in order for a plane to land, they have to take knowledge about which way the wind is blowing. And so they have multiple runways so that the planes can come in against the wind. With his crosswind landing gear, the way he designed that is that a plane could come in and come down the runway, the landing strip, and if the wind was blowing from the opposite direction, the cabin just turned, but the plane kept going forward. And so it would mean that you would not have to build multiple runways in order to bring your planes in. And it didn't seem to go anywhere, except I think during the Korean War, they used that undercarriage because they couldn't build multiple runways over there when that war was going on, so they were equipping the planes with that undercarriage.
And so when he was testifying before Congress, this is for how this should be applied to all airplanes, like both civilian and military, or?
Well, he was just pointing out to them that this could be possible if they wouldn't have to build these multiple runways. But he was also there, and I have a copy of the testimony that he gave, but he was there because he wanted to make it easier for people to get patents and to get some sort of royalty from those patents, because it was a difficult procedure. And he brought that forth to Congress as well.
What were most of his inventions aeronautical, or were there other?
They were all aeronautical. His whole life was spent, once he learned how to fly, his whole life was with aeronautical things. I remember he didn't think that the training system that they have, that the trainers were proper, that the pilots weren't really getting the real sense of feeling of what it would be to fly a plane. And so he built a prototype in our garage. We couldn't put our cars in there. And he'd have me in there after school sitting in this thing, rocking back and forth and doing all sorts of equations on how this thing was functioning. So he also did that. He built a new piece of equipment that they could teach pilots to fly. He had steely blue eyes, and when he would come, he was a presence. When he came in and sat down at the table, you knew he was there. He commanded the conversation at the table, and his conversation was always his frustration in trying to find evidence to convict the Secretary of the Interior. And what he thought the Secretary was doing was taking bribes. I think it was a Sinclair oil company that was bribing him because they wanted to drill on government land. And he finally, I think it took probably 2 years before he finally got all that evidence together, and they convicted the Secretary of the Interior and they put him in jail. That was called the Teapot Dome scandal. I don't know if that's in the textbooks anymore. People probably don't even hear of it, but I imagine today the same thing is probably going on, maybe in a more massive scale. But that was a Teapot Dome scandal. In 1932, there was a Democratic convention in Chicago, and my family went to that. I was there. Rowdy. It was quite an experience for, I guess I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, but it was quite an experience. And he was there, and they were trying to get Roosevelt to be the president, the nominee for the president. He took me in to meet Roosevelt. And I do remember Roosevelt reaching over and patting me on the head, saying hello. I don't remember that he was crippled. It was funny that I didn't see that, but I did not. I did not realize that he was not able to stand. But the reason that I kind of wanted to bring this up about him is that when Roosevelt went into office, he picked Tom Waltz to be his Attorney General. And on his way, on the train, on the way to Washington to take that position, he died. We never knew exactly why, but he died. That's the end of my story with Senator Waltz. What happened to me when I was at Penn State, because I went up there not knowing what I wanted to do. Shouldn't have gone to college when I had no clue about what I wanted to do. But I was there taking home ec. And one Saturday morning, when the teacher was talking about the different sizes of cans, this was a number 2, this is a number 5, and I was thinking, right, here's my brother and all these men that are on my campus that are being trained to go to war, that I better use my brain for something more effective. And I switched to medical technology.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Pearl Harbor obviously was a very dramatic event in our lives. I was still in high school, but I remember thinking Roosevelt's going to declare war, there's no question about that, and I want to be there when he does. And so I tried to get seats in the Senate or the House in order to be, or the Senate had to be in the Senate, to be able to hear that speech, and you couldn't. It was just restricted to very few people who were able to get there. But since my uncle was a senator, I knew my way around the Capitol. And I knew there was a tunnel that connected the Senate office building and the Capitol. And I said to my friend Rosemary, I know how we're going to get there. We're going to go down and we're going to get in that tunnel. And we're going to come in and we're going to hear the president speak. So we did. We got down to the Senate office building and that went fine. And we got into the tunnel. But when we got close to the Capitol, there were Marines there that were armed. So we couldn't go any further. And all the time that the president was speaking, we were in that tunnel. Couldn't hear any of it. Rosemary was really a cute girl, really cute girl. I remember those Marines using some restraint in trying to introduce themselves to her. But that's where we spent, when the president was speaking, that's where I was in a tunnel. Well, yes, of course, we all listened to what he said.
Yeah. What was something memorable from that speech that you remember?
This will live in eternity, I believe he said. I don't remember word for word.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Well, that was a horrible experience. When you can imagine, you know, that we didn't have the video like we have today, so you weren't seeing it on TV or anything like that. But it was on the radio about how many of the men were, you know, had lost out there in Pearl Harbor, how many ships were sunk.
How often would you get letters from
John.
John during the war?
His letters were always censored, and sometimes they would come with whole paragraphs blotted out, so that he wasn't allowed to tell us where he was or what he was doing. And they were always late. You know, it would be months before we would get a letter in terms of the date, you know, how long it took to get to us. You see pictures of that, you know, with all those servicemen grabbing girls and kissing them down, you know, in Washington, D.C. Everybody was euphoric. I was there, and I got kissed by a lot of guys. When he started working, when he left the Navy as soon as he could after the war, he came to Minnesota and he got a job with the Dayton Company, which was a department store, a rather nice department store in Minneapolis. And while he was there, I have all the documentation that he used to convince them to start a discount store, to start the Target stores. And they were hesitant to do that because they had a reputation of high-end quality merchandise. They weren't sure that they wanted to go into a discount store, but they did. In a sort of an interesting way. The first store that they opened was in South St. Paul, and the trucks that came and serviced that building were camouflaged. They didn't want anybody to know that the Daytons were involved in this store. And the first president of that store was Donald Dayton, one of the brothers. My brother was vice president. That was a stressful time too, you know, to be able to manage that, because at that point he had, I think, 8 children. So it was risky for him, you know, to do that, but he did. What happened, though, is that my brother just assumed that since he was the one who originated this idea of the Target stores, that as soon as Donald moved up into the corporate world, that my brother would become the president of the company. But unfortunately, that was a family-owned business, and they brought in an uncle to take over the Target stores. And my brother was so upset about that he left. But immediately after that happened, the May Company called him from down in Indianapolis and asked him to come down there and start another chain of stores for them called The Venture. And he did that. I think you would understand how much effort that takes to start a new business like that. You've got to go before the public, you've got to raise the money, you've got, and then he still had a large family that he was supporting. He finished that. He said he would do that for 5 years, and then he was going to do something else with his life. And that's exactly what he did. he started his own company called the Wholesale Club. And the first thing he did with his wholesale club was put 5 of them around Minneapolis so that he was competing with the Dayton Company at the time, competing actually with their Target stores.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share? It could be anything, or like really anything. Anything that you would want our future generations to know about, or some kind of family motto or mentality.
I think I've exhausted what I know.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah.
Maybe I can.
Hold it. Got it there?
I got it.
You got it? All right.
On the 3, everybody says martini shot.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
Martini shot. That's a wrap.
Here we go.